Many of us have probably received a warning from our parents. That is, never ever get into a romantic relationship while you're in high school, because this would be the starting point of all your misfortunes and will inevitably make your grades suffer. Well, this sentiment is also reflected in our school policies. In most high schools in China, there is a school rule called Prohibition of Close Interaction between Male and Female Students. This school rule is meant to curb all romantic relationships in high school from emerging. So you might be wondering, what exactly is close interaction? So in the case for Fuzhou High School, they include working side by side, dining together, exchanging gifts, and even direct communication. So in the most ideal case, the best thing to do is that girls and boys are in complete isolation. However, things will take an interesting twist after you graduate from high school, because almost no university would covertly ban dating. And in terms of parents, they'll get pretty anxious if you don't find a girlfriend or boyfriend after you're a college senior or graduate from college. In fact, there is a popular practice in China called matchmaking. Something family members and family friends would arrange blind dates for young people. And as you can see on the picture here, this is the matchmaking site in Chengdu People's Park, where parents would place their children's profile on a tree in this park, and then other parents would select potential dates for their own child. So you can see from this contradicting phenomenon that parents seem to divide their children's lives into distinct phases. In high school, their sole objective is to study. And upon entering college, their main task would be, well, I wouldn't say so, but dating would be the main task for college or after college graduation. However, you might think that why is it not good? Isn't it nice to have clear objectives for each phase of your life and then just follow the plan? Well, unfortunately, as it turns out, our life works in a more nuanced way that does not have clear division lines. So today, the topic I'm addressing is why is it important to remove the romance taboo in high school and some of the limitations of the solutions we now have. So first of all, even if schools ban dating or romantic relationship, this doesn't really address the key problem. According to the British Psychological Society, a professional psychological institution in the UK, the biological transition during puberty is significant because the levels of hormones, including oxytocin, testosterone, and estrogen, would fluctuate significantly, which means there will be heightened emotional response and higher likelihood of initiation of romantic relationship during this period. That is to say, even if schools really ban dating, students will still date because this is their natural instinct. So as I have just said, students would date no matter what the school policy is because they will have the natural instinct. According to the China Family Panel survey, around 8% of the students have been dating in the previous 2 years in 2018, which is to say there is still a lot of underground romance despite for the ban of the school. So this gives rise to the potential dating abuse during romantic relationships. According to Pew Research panel, they found out that because of the rise of the internet era, the dating abuse online become more and more prevalent. And among those teenagers who admit that they commit abusive behavior to their partners, the ways of harming are quite diverse. They include send them large amounts of text in a short period of time, access their mobile phone online accounts, and send text messages to others while pretending to be your boyfriend, girlfriend, or ex, modified or deleted their social media profile, send embarrassing pictures to them to someone else, or even download tracking programs to their cell phones without them knowing. So yes, people could be quite malicious sometimes. However, if teens enter into relationships uninformed of these potential dangers, they could potentially and very easily harmed by their partners through these dating abuses, and sometimes they would even unknowingly harm their romantic partners unknowingly. More importantly, dating is really not an overnight enlightenment. It's not like someone could change your default setting and you would change from someone who cannot have direct communication with your peers to someone who could easily maneuver complicated romantic relationships. So in order to investigate how high schoolers would respond to romantic things, I asked some of my friends a question. How would you respond if a boy or a girl proposes to you? And I got some very interesting results. One of my friends said, "Oh my God, I would run away. That is so creepy." And another friend said, "I would look into her eyes deeply and then walk away." And a third response is that I would stare at him until he steps away. Yeah, that is pretty cold-blooded, right? However, even though these responses are sort of funny, they do reflect that teenagers are pretty handcuffed when responding to these romantic topics. And another friend of mine who's in a pretty different scenario had a crush on a boy, but because she couldn't really ask her teachers or parents for advice, since that would be basically confessing the crime, she actually went online to ask AI for help. So you might be thinking that the samples I use are all convenient samples, which means they're not representative of all teens around China. Obviously, yes. However, a recent survey from South China Morning Post reveals that all Chinese youths are paying AI love coaches $7 weekly to learn how to talk on dates. So there's an AI called RIS AI. RIS is the abbreviation for charisma. It is a Gen Z slang to describe someone's charm. So as you can see on the picture here, so I would explain what this picture is. So this RIS AI, it would simulate scenarios during romantic relationship and assess how someone will respond to it. For instance, one of your tasks is to ask a girl called Maddie, an attractive girl in the library, out for a date. And you can see on that this poor guy here only got 65% on his task because he did not tell a bad joke as intended, and he did not make a more engaging transition to studying together. Well, actually, the oppression of the topic of romance in high school have other ramifications. According to a report from Sandian Life Week, a prestigious Chinese magazine, many college students are actually averse to the idea of romantic relationship. In a 2021 survey, 42% of the college students explicitly stated that they do not want a romantic relationship. However, this might not be a concern for them because 70% of them actually don't have a date. Yeah. Why do they do not like the idea of dating? This is because of the increasingly competitive academic and employment situation domestically. Many of them believe that romance is an unnecessary topic because this would waste their time for studying and looking for jobs. But many people online believe this tendency of rejecting romantic relationship is actually good because this shows that they places their future competitiveness above romance. However, is romance really an unnecessary thing? According to a famous psychologist, Erik Erikson, he proposed a lifespan model which separates people's lives into 8 stages, and in each stage, there is a central conflict that he must address. So if you address this conflict successfully, then you would gain a virtue. A virtue means a psychological skill that is definitely essential and indispensable in your life, such as hope, will, and fidelity. However, if you fail to address these conflicts, then you would lose the essential psychological skill and it will have negative impacts in your future life. So one of the very important stages of our life is in early adulthood, where people are generally 19 to 29 years old. And the central conflict here is intimacy and isolation, which means to establish intimate relationships. So if you successfully establish intimate relationships during this period of life, you will receive the virtue of love, which means to receive love from others and the ability to love others. And conversely, if you do not gain this virtue, you would face chronic isolation and have great difficulty in maintaining a romantic relationship with others. So in Erik Erikson's theory, the college students' aversion to romantic relationship might not reflect their maturity. Conversely, this showcases their underdeveloped ability to love others and love themselves. So with that being said, is there really a way to teach someone how to love? Well, there might be. In many Chinese universities are actually trying to open courses related to romance. In Tianjin University, they opened a course called Love and Happiness, where the main aim of this course is to teach students how to enhance their capacity for love for themselves and for others. Also, they aim to establish a healthy view for students' love and marriage. Some of the ways they try to promote close connection between students include sharing milk tea and snacks during class and playing interesting games in class, also to have online chat groups. Some US high schools also opened courses on interpersonal relationship. For instance, the Park Hill School District, a school district in northern Kansas City, it's opened an 18-week course on interpersonal relationship, in which 6 weeks of this course is devoted to dating and marriage. So, interestingly, this district employed a much more concrete way than Chinese universities to tell students what to do during a romantic relationship. For instance, they have an activity called Engaging Scenario, where students would act out potential scenes during romantic relationship and react to them. For instance, suppose you're at home with your girlfriend or boyfriend. How would you act? How would you choose to engage with your significant other in order to promote your future sexual health? However, compared to US high schools, Chinese high schools' content on romantic relationship seems to be much less adequate. The only sexual or relationship-related course I received during middle school is actually in our politics class. The only suggestion, yes, you might relate to that. The only suggestion I got was that you need to prudently and wisely deal with the relationship and romantic feelings in your life. Yes, I do know that universal truth, but how exactly should I act in order to be prudent and responsible? A web page devised by the US Department of Health and Human Services actually provided a much more detailed explanation. They listed out the common characteristics of a healthy and unhealthy relationship. For example, in an unhealthy relationship, your partner might make you feel scared of the reaction to things, or they might physically harm you. So if you see those traits in your relationship, you need to get away from it. It has actually provided suggestions in terms of how you should do, what you should do when your partner is abusive. You should stay at home and make a call to him to declare your attitude. And in the meantime, you need to ensure an adult is around you so that your safety can be ensured. And in terms of sexual assault during a romantic relationship, the level of detail in the US Department of Health and Human Services website is also much more detailed than the Chinese version. It told students to use a diary to keep track of the dates of the violence that happened where you were, what exactly the person you're dating did, and the effects it caused. In this way, the policeman could get the evidence of the harm your partner did, and the criminals could be tracked. So we can see that our education system has already made some efforts to promote our romantic relationships. However, there are still some limitations. First of all, there is a dubious incentive. Because of the declining population in China in recent years, the government actively tries to promote female students to get married and give birth earlier. Actually, in a recent diplomatic conference between Renmin University of China and a foreign country, one of the esteemed professors in Renmin University actually asked, I've heard that in your country, there are much more children than that in China, compared to the percentage. So what did you do exactly to let the female students give birth to children obediently and as many as possible? Although his covertly sexist talk has made many people, especially the younger generation, very dissatisfied. He also reflects the common sentiment of the society to have more children, and especially forcing or suggesting the female students to have more children. So this made many people suspect that the romance courses opened in Chinese colleges might have the incentive to have female students give birth to more children. Moreover, on an individual perspective, we have to confess that the first thing any young adults do after he or she gets into a relationship is probably not to do some research on a governmental website or to take dating courses in school. They might get overwhelmed by the good feelings provided by the relationship. As a result, it might be very necessary for schools to make these romantic courses mandatory for students and provide them guidance on that matter. So some parents might be worried, am I asking their child to rush into a relationship or get a boyfriend or girlfriend in high school? Well, absolutely no, because every individual is different in their emotional maturity, and there's no right age for dating for teenagers. However, school dating courses or relationship-related courses can provide individuals ways to identify abusive relationships and also make them more emotionally mature. So whether you're in a relationship or not, these courses can help you prepare for your future relationships anyways. Thank you.